Welcome back to The Comfy Chairs, a podcast from 123 Limited. This is your host, Kate. Metacognition is a lovely word, fun to say, and, in simple terms, refers to thinking about how we think. A more in-depth definition explains that metacognition is the capacity or ability to reflect on, monitor, evaluate, and even control one's cognitive processes. This ability impacts learning, problem-solving, decision-making, and critical thinking. It requires attention and rigor. It means building self-awareness, and it will often result in humbling realizations as you discover the limits of your understanding and uncover what you just don't know. That sounds an awful lot like leadership. I had the benefit of a liberal arts education, one that stressed the importance of critical thinking and exploring ideas and perspectives. It was, in essence, an education in metacognition. Some of my fondest memories of that time involve late-night conversations and debates that were had for the simple pleasure of conversation and debate of those new ideas and perspectives. Given her prominent role in those memories, it seems just right to have today's guest join me for a conversation about leadership and critical thinking. Welcome to The Comfy Chairs. I love to let my guests introduce themselves, so please, ma'am, have at it.
Hi, I am Amelia Menk Brown, and I am a first-time startup founder and CEO, and I am here in the comfy chair.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you.
It's been much too long. I'm so glad we reconnected.
Me
recently.
too. So good to see you and meet Nate, finally.
Yes. And I miss David, too. Like, I told Nate I hadn't realized I was missing the two of you until we talked a couple of months ago. It's like, oh, these people have been gone from my life for too long.
It's always amazing when you can reconnect with somebody and it's like exactly where the relationship is exactly where you left off 20 years ago, maybe 30, but we aren't counting today. So
no, not at all. Not at all. But it's a real gift. Yes. Yeah. So I think of you as one of my particularly smart friends, and I'm really glad that we get to have a conversation not just about leadership in general, but also the thinking skills that are important in leadership. What I want to start with, though, is making a distinction between quote unquote intelligence and critical thinking. Yes, they're related, but they aren't necessarily coupled inextricably with each other. So for you, by your lights, what role do they both play in effective leadership?
So I think there are a couple of ways we could go there. But I want to just say, all right, first, how are we defining intelligence? Yeah. And I would offer that most people probably have not done an IQ test or a similar quantitative testing of their intelligence. But what we do see, especially in the professional world, are people who are high achievers and who do a lot, who get a lot of acclaim, and generally succeed and can fit in. The ability to do that does not necessarily mean that you are a good critical thinker. And if you are a good critical thinker, it doesn't necessarily mean you are going to see success in the real world. No, I actually think that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, coming out of a liberal arts college, coming out of grad school, believing that the world was the meritocracy that I was told that it was going to be. And my first corporate experience, I learned that it absolutely was not. That said, it took me forever to figure out, like, I'm doing really good work. I'm doing really good thinking. Why isn't this translating to even being seen? And it's just that the corporate world isn't set up that way.
Yeah.
And that was a big shock.
I remember a very similar moment of, I can see the conference room I was sitting in when I realized, oh, it's not about having the good idea. There are so many other things that come into play to have the recognition, to have the acceptance, because thinking only got me so far.
Yeah.
Right. I like that you point out that most people haven't had a test to tell them whether or not they are intelligent. And we could probably have a moment of a tangent talking about the perceived value or lack thereof of those tests. But I like to think of intelligence as something that's akin to processing power. You know, how capable of consuming information are you, essentially? And that is entirely different than being able to think critically. I also think the idea of criticality, critique, critic kind of gets a bad rap. That we see critical as being a bad thing unless it has thinking attached to it. And I think talking about what is a critique is an important part of understanding critical thinking.
So I think that's really interesting. I think that we exist in a culture of knowing as opposed to a culture of thinking. And we reward fast knowing over thoughtful consideration. So it does take time to be critical. It does. And I don't think it's absolutely not a bad thing to poke holes in something, to fire test something. Corporate America rewards fast knowing and quickly selling it to everybody who is your neighbor at that conference table. So yes, criticality is important. In my experience, I find that criticality is pushed aside, not because it is not valued, or, well, I guess it ultimately is not valued, but it's not perceived as bad. It's just that we don't have time for that. You just need to know. And why are you slowing down this process? And so I feel like some of the art of achievement in corporate America really is being able to be versed enough in the topic where you've got the criticality down. And then once you're in there advocating, it's another skill set entirely. It is about maneuvering through the opinions that are there, maneuvering through the power structures that are there, and figuring out how to position your belief, your conviction within that landscape of thought, whether it's right or wrong.
Well, that's a different topic, isn't it?
Yes, it really is. And I would also offer there that I strongly believe, whatever a business's product is, whether it's a service or whether it's a thing, our constituents depend on us to provide the value of having fire tested it already. If it's in market, we generally as consumers believe that this has been tested. This has passed all of the gates of determining whether it's good, whether it works. And that's not often the case. So I think for me as a product developer, that is a job that I take very seriously, that it is my job to fire test before I give it to you. And I often found that in corporate America, I was not allotted that luxury of doing all the fire testing, of poking all of the holes. And then the result was I give this product to you, the consumer, and it's not everything my sales rep said it was going to be.
Very true. And I think every I think a lot of people in business have experienced that, that what I was sold and what I receive,
Yes.
two different things.
Yes.
So critical thinking and leadership.
Yep.
Why is it important for leaders to be critical thinkers?
If you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to adjust that question slightly.
Thank you.
And I would like to say, for me as a leader, when I think about critical thinking, what I want is I want the people that I surround myself with to be critical thinkers.
Okay.
It is in order. So I value innovation. I value the creative process. And if my work as a leader is simply to hand you, my employee, a checklist of things that I want you to do that replicates how I have thought through things and how I do things, the greatest possibility, whatever it is that we're making, whatever experience it is that we're creating, all it can be is the limitation of my brain, because it's my checklist.
Yes.
It is essential for me to have people around me who can think critically. I can speak very confidently. I can speak very passionately. I need people whose critical thinking, that they're also capable to share that critical thinking in the face of my confidence.
Yes.
So that it is a critical dialogue that we are all exploring with the same sense of curiosity and wonder and skepticism, to again go back to ensure that whatever it is that we're creating, we are fire testing, we are making sure it's the real deal.
Yeah.
So that is why when I recruit, I really, really love getting, shout out, liberal arts candidates.
Yes.
Not to say that other colleges and universities who train in a very traditional way or a very focused way can't have critical thinkers. But I think, we met in a liberal arts school, and I think what we got there was not just our classroom experience. I mean, I feel like we were steeped in 4 years of critical thinking that went nonstop.
Yes.
We were constantly discussing things. We were up in the dorm lounge until all hours of the night, thinking about ideas and poking holes at each other's ideas.
Yes.
And whether we were in the lounge or, somewhere out on campus, or at Country Kitchen with a giant mug of coffee.
Huge mug of coffee. I still have my Country Kitchen travel mug, by the way.
The thoughts were always going. It became how we lived. And I don't think I've ever stopped to that. And that leads me to say, and anybody who knows me will know that I say this all the time, how we do things greatly affects the outcome of what it is that we make. And so again, I come back to creating this community of critical thinking around me and fostering that as a leader, as opposed to just wanting that in myself.
Yeah. I love how you reframed it, that it's not just about the leader, it's about the team. And I would argue that is a product of critical thinking. That the best critical thinking takes time to look inward as well, not just at the problems outside, but also, how am I thinking? Am I the right person for this?
Yes.
Am I limiting the work, the product? I think what it really gets down to is intentional self-awareness. I am going to examine my behaviors, my feelings, and my thoughts, and all the ways that I'm showing up because of that. So if somebody is trying to build critical thought into how they lead, start with yourself, examining yourself, and asking questions like, do I have the right people around me? Am I directing or guiding? What does that actually look like?
I am right there with you. And what I was thinking was, I'm going to say doing business or doing whatever it is that we do as a profession, I believe it is truly an act of creativity. And by that, what I'm really getting at is it is not necessarily knowing exactly what is going to be created. Because if I knew that, I could just give you the instructions and we'd do it, and that would be the end. It is, like you said, it takes a degree of confidence and vulnerability to say, I don't know that.
Right.
And I'm going to reach to you because your brain may know that. And now together we can create something that is even more amazing. So I do believe that being able to create requires that vulnerability, requires us to connect with each other. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is if we feel worried that there is one way to know or one way to think, we are only going to want to get in line with the person who is in power above us. If the culture of the community of creation, so your business, for example, is that you can be an independent thinker and you are expected to generate that thought and contribute that thought, I think all that is upside for a business. So as a leader, it also behooves me to invest in my team, invest in their growth. And I know this is going to sound super altruistic and like a really big idea, but that changes the world.
I agree. No, I think the best leadership recognizes that their role is actually to create the environment where people can do their best work. And of course, in a business setting, we are concerned with performance and productivity. There are jobs to be done. There are profits to manage. And it's the way you go about that that actually matters, that you recognize it is a human activity rather than a object activity.
Yeah, like a mechanized activity.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a human activity. I love that language.
And thank you. Yeah, and it's necessary to make certain the people have what they need in order to do the job. And I think a lot of leadership these days has become so directive and somewhat single-minded that gets missed constantly. I think that we need to think more in leadership than we do. And I'm not saying that there's thoughtlessness or lack of intelligence, but there has become this very rote way of demanding results and focusing so much on productivity and control that people have gotten left out of the equation in most industries.
Yeah, I want to respond to that. Couple thoughts in my mind. One is that as I was talking, I was looking over to you and I'm like, oh yeah, but you come from an HR perspective, and how do we operationalize this? Because it can't be so squishy that it can't be managed. Because at the end of the day, this is a business.
You talked about how do we operationalize these things and make them not squishy. I think the answer to that, with any value actually, is decision making. What informs your decisions? If it's creativity, investment in people for the sake of growth, if it's turning a profit, which is not a bad thing, but if it's your first concern, you will see it in the decisions. And that is what you are operationalizing. When you make a choice to do something or not do something, it becomes the how.
Yes.
That becomes your culture. Your decisions become your culture. And I think this is part of the reason that critical thinking and intention are so important in leadership, not just to have around you, as you've pointed out, but to recognize that your decision-making ability fundamentally impacts the way work gets done.
Yep, absolutely.
It's really important for us to recognize that cognition takes immense amounts of energy. This is why we have the limbic system, because it's carrying most of that thought load on autopilot for us.
Yes.
When we have to engage the prefrontal cortex, it drains. It sucks up the energy. That's why people can be so exhausted after attending a class for a day. Like, why am I so tired? I just sat in class. You're tired because you had to think.
Yes.
At a level that your day-to-day job may not demand of you. So caring for yourself has to be, it's a mandate for good thought, because your body can't sustain if you're not eating well, sleeping well, moving well. You will not have the capacity for deep thought then.
Exactly. And I love that you're bringing up cognitive science. And you're right. After we go through ingesting large amounts of new information, we need time for our brain to make all of the connections. This is why we say, I'm going to sleep on it. It is because our brain does that work while we are powered down, and we wake up and we see things with fresh eyes and literally a fresh brain. I think that has to be for me as a leader, that has to be part of the culture that we instill. And I am a type A person. I want to go get it done. I am very goal oriented. Anybody who works with me feels that urgency, but that doesn't mean we're going to do it blindly. And I want to kind of bring back a thread that we were talking about earlier. There's also this notion in corporate America of you can't ignore the power structure.
No.
And who wields the power and who wields the knowing. And I think we need to remember that at all times. And also, I am very interested in making sure that we are not prioritizing knowing the right answer above considering and thinking, and that critical examination of what might be or how we might do.
It's interesting, you talking about knowing versus thinking. Knowing is very linear. Thinking is much more complex relational patterns and connections. And this is a gross generalization, but there is a distinction between masculine and feminine in what we're talking about. And if we talk about corporate America, it is a predominantly male-driven practice, if you will, where women have leadership. You do see either they are trying to follow that template, and I'm not judging, it's just a thing. They learn how to work the system, literally, or they're breaking that mold and creating something new, like a Midwest startup that has less firm borders, more permeable approaches to how you work and live.
Yeah, when I left corporate, the one point of self-recognition that I knew more than anything was that I needed to stop assimilating. We have been so trained about what productivity looks like. And I would argue that you're being maximally productive by shifting how you're working. But I think when we give ourselves this grace to work authentically and realistically, we're just going to produce better.
We are making guesses constantly. And I think that's part of whether it's business ownership, leadership, being in a relationship, any parts of our lives. It's important to reach a decision, but you can be structured, but you have to be flexible.
Yeah.
There has to be some give in that, because I'm going to be wrong sometimes.
Yes.
Let me readjust. Let me make new decisions. And I think that's part of the great thinking, is recognizing that mistakes are a given. You are going to get it wrong. So be prepared to rethink.
Yes. And I think I agree with you. And it's the nature of thinking. There's an iterativeness to it, where I can give you the thumbnail outline of what I think is going to happen. I can give you the big picture. As I get closer and closer, I refine and get more accurate. But those are changes. And I think that's just how it is. And if we pretend that it's any different, well, it's going to be a lie, and we're going to spend a lot of struggle trying to shove ourselves into a box that was never that could never be relied on for accuracy in the first place.
I want to turn a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked about your startup. We haven't named it. And I would like to make certain that we talk about it by name. Part of the mission of your company, MyCited, is to be in service to neurodiverse minds.
Yes.
And I think sometimes when we have these conversations about ways of thinking, critical thinking, we don't always account explicitly for neurodivergence. So I would like to bring that topic in because it is a part of the mission and focus of the work that you're doing. From your perspective, how can leaders be more intentional in including neurodiversity into how they're working with their teams around thoughts and decisions?
Okay, so first of all, I'm going to let you know that I'm going to give you an exclusive, which is that we are rebranding. So talk about iterative thinking and being able to make space for change. Where I started with this company 2.5 years ago, the concept was to name it MyCited, MyCited, MyCited. And we were very interested in looking at ways to be able to cite specific pieces of information, particularly from multimedia sources. But as we explored, and like I've said, this is a creative process, the work grew. And I think it will be also appropriate to tell you that the new name of our company is Knowzy, Knowzy, Knowzy. The idea being, obviously a play on words between knowing and curiosity.
Love it.
So here's the concept. And we, disclaimer to everyone, we are a startup. We are beginning. I have incredibly broad aspirations to do so much more than where we are now. But I'm going to talk about now, and then I'll give a little sneak peek into the future. So the concept that we're working with is that as we learn, as we consume information to learn, we are no longer doing it like we did when we were kids. When we were kids, we would read a book and we would underline things. We might bring our highlighter out. We might write some notes in the margin.
Oh, yes, we did.
And I still do, honestly. Yeah. But in addition to that, we are consuming information from multimedia sources all the time, just like the listeners of this podcast, you are listening. And how is it that when we listen to a great podcast, that we can take out our virtual highlighter and underline what's important to us and be able to come back to it so that we can connect it with our prior knowledge and also connect it with the future knowledge that we will have. Being literate is making connections. And I'm really interested in that concept of how does a modern person today gather this information, and then how do we think about it? So Knowzy is a tool that enables you to gather information from text, audio, video, and image sources, to save it in one place, and to pair with it your notes, perhaps, and also tools that allow you to organize it and analyze it. So in Knowzy, what you can do is have a note that has a quote in it that you have captured from the source that fascinated you. You can add a comment to it. You can add color coding to it. You can add emojis to it. You can add tagging to it. You can add images to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you create this self-curated library of knowledge. This is your background knowledge from which all of these future thoughts can spring, but not just thoughts, but knowledge. This is a place where you are making connections and making authentic new knowledge. And the way that we started it is a very linear process. I have a note. I can combine notes into groups. Groups can be combined into projects. It's like a nice, neat file structure.
Mm-hmm.
You would love it.
Probably.
That said, it is absolutely essential to me that all kinds of minds can do thinking work here. And so we're creating another space for analysis. And this other space is a place that is much more dimensional. It is messier. And it enables a user to pull out their notes. And when I'm talking about a note, it's a concept. It is an idea that you've gotten from somewhere, whether it's your idea or a quote from somebody else. You can pull out many of these and start using drawing or additional note-taking tools to make new meaning from these multiple pieces that you have brought in. It is a creation center. We also have the ability to drag in graphic organizers so that you can do structured thinking. We're going to have the ability for collaboration here. So the goal is really this creation of knowledge so that I can later communicate it either in my own casual parlance with a friend over a drink or in a much formal instance like writing or speaking.
Mm-hmm.
We are contending with more information than we ever have before. And between that and the multimedia, we need a tool to help us manage all of this information that's coming at us in new ways and still keep being those critical thinkers. I want to say that when we start talking about all that information, we're all going to think about AI. Very interesting things happening with artificial intelligence. And as my vision for this company, we will definitely be using more and more AI as we go forward. That said, our goal is not to use AI to give you a product. Our goal is to help you manage more information, but keep you in the driver's seat of critical thinking. Getting back to neurodiversity, first of all, in the most general terms, people come to knowledge in so many different ways. Right. There is not one way to come to knowledge. We need to be able to free ourselves to come to knowledge in different ways, and Knowzy is set up to do this. Now, my particular inspiration is having two neurodiverse students. My son has been diagnosed with ADHD, my daughter ADHD and dyslexia, and it has been a journey for both my husband and I as advocates on behalf of their learning. I have learned so much about their minds. And that was part of the inspiration of building this tool, because we knew she was brilliant. And actually, in her case, we have the testing, the IQ test to prove it. Most people don't have that, but we knew she was brilliant. And we're like, why isn't this working? And even after having all of the tutoring and all of the testing, we still struggle because people don't understand that our brain processes information differently. When you make products that are for a specific type of learner, we celebrate these as equitable tools, and they are. However, the challenge we have is that if I make a tool only for dyslexic learners, I'm taking this kid who has felt marginalized for her entire academic career, and I'm making her feel different again.
Yeah.
I'm othering her again. When I talk about Knowzy, sometimes the equity story gets lost because we talk about this as a tool for everybody. But I believe strongly that our equity story is even more powerful than a tool that is only built for dyslexic minds, because we have integrated accommodation. We have built a tool that an entire classroom can use. And it seamlessly accommodates dyslexic learners and ADHD learners so that they are no different in the classroom. So pulling back to your question about how we harness the brilliance of neurodiverse learning in business is recognizing that it absolutely takes diverse thinking to solve complex problems. There is research that shows that you put 5 experts at a table to solve a complex problem, and you put 5 very diverse thinkers at a table to solve a complex problem who aren't experts. The latter group is going to solve more successfully than the former.
Yep.
And as leaders, we need to be seeking to build teams with this in mind.
Because you are dealing with adults, you are dealing with people who have entered into this agreement to do work. And while the teacher may have information like test results to give them insight into the specifics of those needs and the diversity, a leader has the power to ask, to just ask, how is it that you will best be included?
Yeah.
What are the tools and resources that you need to be able to participate? And you don't have to call out. It doesn't have to happen in a public way where you are creating, well, Kate's different, so we're going to ask her in a different way. You can use that one-on-one time and observation of the person and give them choice and agency in that conversation to tell you, this is what I need. And then you get to honor and respect them.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yes.
And it may be more complex down the road as you're looking at mechanisms and solutions. But being inclusive in terms of how people think starts with that simple question of, what would you prefer?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask while interviewing is, tell me how you learn.
Yes.
And it is very, I'm not looking for a specific answer. I am looking for awareness and ability to communicate what you need, because I expect to have conversations like that. And to your point, it is on the shoulders of the leader to open up that inclusion, but it is also on the shoulders of the employee to be able to articulate what they need, how their strengths come through, and help direct how they can contribute. And if that employee can't do that, then again, like, there's our line saying, you know, this squishy thing of inclusivity and, you know, everybody gets to play. That's not what we're saying. Not everybody gets to play.
Nope.
What we're saying is we need a diversity of skill set, and I am depending on you as a business leader to bring me your strength and articulate what you need so that you can contribute.
One concept that has been rising to the surface for me a lot in the last few weeks is the idea of mutuality, particularly in the workplace, that we all own that experience of what work looks like. Yes, there is more weight on the shoulders of the leader. They carry a certain responsibility, but as an employee, I am also responsible for my experience. I am also responsible for my own engagement, for empowering myself, recognizing where I have control, recognizing where I have little to no choice because of policy or the choices I've made to work for a certain employer. It also means I have to advocate for myself.
Yes,
the leader should, ought, must open the door, but sometimes the employee needs to knock, if you will. And being an adult worker in the world, means using your voice.
Yes. And recognizing that you are on a team and you have got to figure out how you are going to contribute to this team to get it to where it needs to go. Can we talk a minute about vocabulary as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I also see, whether we're talking about critical thinking, but when we're talking about critical thinking in a community, it is so important that we are using a common language. And this could be, talking about our interpersonal skills. This could be talking about culture. This could simply be like figuring out what your taxonomy is for your product build. There is something to be said that words can carry different meanings. They can carry different subtleties.
Yes.
And I think that it is essential to be able to have common understandings of what we mean by what words. And so I think earlier I had alluded to, personality tests that color code you. They have their limits, but I would also say in places where I have seen that successfully used, it gave everybody a common vocabulary.
Yeah.
And like one of the things that I realized when we did that at one organization that I worked in was I recognized that understanding that certain people are going to be bringing certain strengths. So if I looked at you, Kate, who is very social and very conceptual, I can look at Nate, who is sitting next to you, and say, okay, that is a fantastic idea, Kate. Nate, how do you think we might operationalize this? And now we can transition. And so as a leader, being able to have the whole team be able to talk that language and really make sure that as you're building on people's strengths, that you have a abundance of different kinds of strengths. That's what we need.
I am somebody that administers those types of personality tests. I have like a small slate, a menu of like DISC and Myers-Briggs that I do. And I am always so clear with people when I do them in team settings. You are more than your dot. You are more than these letters. What this gives us for your team is a common language to talk about things like decision-making, mindsets, natural choices, like how you orient yourself to the world, because it is so important that we be able to speak about the same things in those relationships with each other. So, yeah.
I think there's also something, I don't know. What I want to say is I think there's something that's human about being skeptical of difference, maybe being a little bit scared of difference. I'm not sure evolutionarily, why exactly that is, maybe just to make us cautious and, not die. But doing these sort of things just, again, really helped me to understand, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a thing, and I can name it. The power of naming, so important to help us like building our world. I can name what that is, and I can now point to it and figure out how it all works together. So instead of seeing difference as this scary thing or this annoying thing, we can see it as helpful and almost like now I look at it and I'm like, wow, like I really need someone like that. I need one of those because I don't have that.
That's exactly right. Well, I know the Myers-Briggs gets a lot of side eye these days, but the original purpose of that particular personality test was to help people discover and celebrate their differences. I can't think of a better piece of work. And maybe you don't need a personality test for it. Maybe it is things like thinking about the different strengths and skills that you need for a team, but being able to pull a diverse group of people together in terms of background, preferences, whatever the thing is that differentiates us, recognizing that we fear difference because we're still, our minds have not, our world has evolved, our minds have not evolved
Yes.
past our ancestry. recognizing that, acknowledging it, being thoughtful and intentional, and then celebrating the difference
Yes.
is what we should be trying to do. I feel.
I agree. And you know what? This is how we solve the problems of our lifetime. And, no matter where you are on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that there are major problems that we need to solve in our lifetime. We don't solve those in simple ways. I told you I was an optimist. I strongly believe in the human capacity for solving. And we just need to get out of our way and open our minds to imagining how might we. And when we do, we can do incredible things. And again, I'll pull that back around to that's why I left corporate, was I wanted to say how might we, and I couldn't couldn't act on that. And so here we are in startup world, and where innovation is possible and manifestation is possible. And I would ask everybody out there who, whether you're in corporate or you're not, just embrace the how might we, so that we can really live to all of our potential and get to solving the pressing issues that face us.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Going back to what you said at the very beginning of all of this, it is, when we're talking about leadership, what we should be doing is never putting a pin in knowing. It doesn't stop. And as leaders, we should be pushing ourselves and our teams to constantly being curious, and then pulling back this notion of iteration, because I can be curious, I can know as much as I can today, and then tomorrow I'm going to know just a little bit more. And that's going to reposition my perspective. And then I'm going to have to change again.
Yep.
To recognize that this is just this eternal process of movement and change and growth, I think is essential for leaders, no matter, what type of leadership we're doing.
I agree. The size of your team, the industry, the shift, any of the things that could differentiate one leader's experience from another, the thread that runs through is, are you engaging in that thought life that allows you to be intentional and mindful with your people?
Yes.
So that they can bring their best. Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun. Your chair is indeed comfy.
Good. I'm glad that you came to the comfy chairs.
This was fantastic. This was so much fun. We got to do it again.
Yes, please. Most definitely. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. If this conversation sparks something useful, please follow the comfy chairs and leave a review. Those small actions help more people find the show. Got a leadership question you'd like featured in a future Comfy HQ episode? Please send it my way. I'd love to hear what's on your mind. And when you're ready to move from ideas into action, 123 Limited helps leaders build stronger teams, sharper strategies, and better talent plans. Learn more at 123limited.com. That's ONE23LTD.com. Thanks for listening.